welcome to another video. So there's no shout outs at the moment as I'm trying to get all of the videos from the old channel remade and put up onto the new channel so that you guys don't have to keep going back and forth to find information that you need for your course. So if you're expecting a shout out, have a look back over some of the previous videos to see if you're mentioned in one of those. If not, then pop me a message down below and I'll give you a shout out in the next video. Today we're going to be looking at Pharrell Williams' Freedom. This is not one of the videos that I teach at my school, so this is one of the ones that I found more difficult. I found a really good link to another YouTube video that I'll pop in the description box below for you guys who are studying this. I am going to be doing more videos on the music videos that you guys are studying, but they'll have to wait until after I've gone through Luther. Hopefully this will give you some information for the video if you are studying it. Pop me any questions or comments in the box below or through Twitter and I'll get back to you if you need more information. So the opening shot that we have to the video is a very conventional establishing shot. It focuses on the skyline, which would suggest a wealthy built-up city, but it also includes the bright sun, which represents normally the start of something new. Here we have the sun setting, which is contrasted and sort of linking to the image that we see in the next frame in the center. It's contrasted in the sense that we've gone from something very bright to something very dark, but we did have that sort of end of the day motif at the beginning of the video. The city at night is illuminated by the buildings, which are all man-made, so again contrasting to the sun that we had at the beginning, but also representing the fast-paced lifestyle that comes with living in a location like the one we see here. We then get diegetic sound of the street, which can be heard over the top of the track itself. The track is more muted and in the background here. We then get a group of black men who are represented as slaves. Now this provides an element of historical context because America has a very long history with the slave trade and also has a lot of issues with race that still exist today. We get more wide-angle shots of city scenes, which are used to emphasize the scale of man-made buildings and also contrasting with nature, which we're going to see later on in the video. We then get a person silhouetted against the sky. Now by silhouetting this person, it removes any sort of gender, age or race and discrimination that might come with some of those, or prejudice that comes with some of those characteristics. Now interestingly, they seem to be striving for the chain or reaching up for the chain, and the chain is normally associated with a lack of freedom, so it's almost like they're reaching for something that's constricting, while the birds in the background remain uncaged and are therefore free. We get an extreme bird's eye view, which can be seen in the next shot and provides an element of contrast with it. On the one hand, the long open road is a stereotypical representation of freedom, but the land around this road has been sort of ravaged by humans, almost looking like a quarry, which suggests that nature is under human control and nature has a lack of freedom. Now in the centre frame we can see Pharrell standing in front of the men from the beginning of the video. This could be a link to his own heritage and culture growing up within America. His dress codes are also an element of historical context because they're very similar to the overalls worn in the 1930s for men who were part of sort of hard labour work. The high-angled shot we then get on the right-hand side of the screen makes it very difficult to make out the faces of the individuals who are involved. Now in that sense it depersonalises the men and in doing so takes away a lot of their freedom. Whereas the close-up shot of Pharrell gives sort of importance to the lyrics that he speaks. He's using direct mode of address, which creates a connection between us and him within the video, and this suggests that he's talking directly to us, and hopefully by doing so it'll make the message of his song more important and more impactful. We then have a high-angle shot of people reaching out to each other, and this gives a visual representation of the line that he speaks, "Hold on to me." It also provides contrast in the way that different cultures and races are represented, as here the majority of the people featured are white. This then contrasts to the next two shots, which are close-up on other individuals. So we have a lady wearing a hijab, which is shown in the scene on the right-hand side. This is a very positive representation of females within Muslim cultures because the bright colours on her clothing and also on the background help to make the scene seem more light and cheerful. We then have an image of a small child who's an Inuit. In a similar way to the woman on the previous slide, the child is using direct mode of address to create a connection with the demographic, and together these two images represent the freedom to be part of different cultures and beliefs. A further representation of this belief is shown through the mid-shot of the male holding an urn. Although we've got selective focus used so that the background is more blurry and we focus on him who is sharper and more clear in the foreground, we can tell that this is not a highly economically developed location. We then get a shot of the earth on the right hand side. Now a large focus is placed on the fact that the landscape seems to be red and yellow, which contrasts to the stereotypical images and representation of earth as a country of a lot of green land. Now this could be an indication that Williams is making a very political statement in his video on climate change. Further evidence for that can be seen through the emphasis that is placed on the sky when we see these more natural images coming through in the first and second scenes here. So the natural shots contrast with the images that we've seen before of the large, well-built cities. And when considering the overall meaning of the song, these could be referencing the freedom that humans have over the earth, or could reference the idea that nature needs to be allowed more freedom to grow and to thrive. This is then contrasted again through that final shot that we have on the right hand side here, where the natural images are contrasting to the images of the men working on the rocks, because in a way they're breaking up nature. The colour palette is significantly more muted here, suggesting a darker and more restrictive time. It also adds more evidence to the racial difference between the people we see as a whole and the soldier who's forcing the men to work. This could be a commentary not only on race, but on interference in other countries' ability to be free. We then go back to the man that we saw in the previous shot. He's seen scattering the ashes into the wind, which connotes freedom and sort of is a very, I don't know, idealised way of saying goodbye, I guess, to a loved one. It seems very calm and relaxing and sort of like a more natural way of saying goodbye. Now this could play upon demographics' own beliefs, so this could be playing upon my own beliefs about what freedom is as the ash floats into the sky. Interestingly, the shot on the left and the shot in the middle has a very seamless transition between the two. So the movement of the flock here is called a dance, and actually the group of starlings together is called a sort of murmuration. Now not only does this represent freedom, but it's also very symbolic because birds are normally representative of freedom in itself, and so this obviously links very heavily to the title and the meaning of the song. Contrasting to that, though, is a male warrior in the desert, further representing the different cultures that we've seen so far within the video as a whole. Now this warrior is on his own, which could invoke a sense of isolation, but it could also show that he has the freedom to live his life as he chooses. Unlike the man that we've just seen in the desert, though, there's a lack of freedom being represented through the Lego scene. So what the Lego scene shows is a very iconic video or image of a Chinese man standing up to tanks in Tiananmen Square, which again I'll link below in the description box so you guys can see it yourself. Now this is a very serious topic, but it appears to be trivialised through the fact that it's being played out in Lego. Now on the one hand, this could be argued that it not only represents the loss of freedom or the idea that we have to stand up for freedom like the protesters were, but on the other hand it could also represent the idea that we have more freedom today to represent these historical acts through the art that exists for us today. Now following the standoff that we witnessed during the last time we saw the men who were working on the rocks, now they're holding their shovels up in a symbol of freedom. They also appear to be joining in Pharrell Williams when he sings the chorus of the song. We also then have black and white clips of individuals, again from history, being included. So we've got a black and white clip of Muhammad Ali being used here, which could be a reference to the fact that he campaigned for an end to black discrimination, which again links to the historical context of this song, but also through the fact that he's a very determined and motivated character, which reflects a kind of sort of mental freedom that we have. Now the message of mental freedom could be backed up by the fact that Pharrell seems to be mimicking the movements of Muhammad Ali as the frame sort of transitions to him. But we pan and zoom in to the piano player in the background in this extreme close-up. We get scenes of his actions as he's playing interspersed with the scenery of the sort of place that they're in at the moment. Now this not only provides contrast to the location, because we would expect piano players to be in a place where it's perhaps a little bit more put together and not as broken down, but it also represents the idea of freedom through music and art. And the art is then carried through into that right-hand screenshot where we see graffiti. Now graffiti is often very controversial and polarizing. Some people view it as destructive, other people view it as a form of art. The fact that we've got names framing the abandoned structure suggests a need to be free from materialism, or perhaps a need to be free from this idea of having more or having things that are bigger and better than what we had before. This idea is also reinforced when the camera cuts to William standing in the middle of an abandoned shopping mall. So this implies the need again to be free from these material goods. And perhaps sort of emphasizing this is the natural shots that we have next. Now this natural shot that's in the center is quite a beautiful image, both technically and I suppose in terms of its content. So in the foreground we have a very warm sort of red glow on the rocks, whereas in the background we've got this picturesque landscape which seems to be at odds with what Pharrell was singing and where he was in the previous shot. But the clouds change on the right hand side in this sort of time-lapse footage to become darker, more aggressive, again potentially referencing climate change. The aggressive shots continue as we move through to see the cowboy on the horse. Could be a representation of freedom achieved through risk-taking behaviour, but it could also show the lack of freedom of nature in the sense that man seems to be more dominant over nature and seems to have more power here. Now we then move into that centre frame where we see the women who were very briefly referenced on the screens at the beginning of the video. They're all dressed in very similar pastel colours and are positioned in the same way to indicate uniformity and therefore a lack of freedom, which contrasts to that third shot of the newborn baby, because children are often told that they can do whatever they want, they can achieve whatever they put their mind to, and are presented with this sort of freedom that seems to be lost as we grow into adults and is sort of lost over time. Linking to the lyrics of the song, then we have this idea of a cheetah. So this anchors the lyrics, cheetahs need to eat. We're shown the image of the cheetah across the barren landscape, which is very typical for the sort of mise-en-scène of deserts and where cheetahs live. But the idea that cheetahs have to eat could be another criticism of man's domination over the earth, the idea that we're taking away the resources that animals thrive on naturally. We then have a cutscene which shows Pharrell mimicking the actions of the cheetah. Now on the one hand he could be representing the antelope who has the freedom to run, but he could also be representing the cheetah and signifying this idea of mental strength and freedom to overcome obstacles rather than letting negative thoughts enslave us. However, we have intertextuality in the scene that he's in at the moment where the children are acting out Robin Hood on stage. The rich have been ensnared to represent the idea that money controls and binds people rather than freeing them, like Robin Hood's gang does. And this message can also be seen through the image on the left-hand side in a different way though. So it's very clear that the two boys who we see here have no money and they're suffering because of their lack of money. But the sharing of wealth and supporting others would solve this problem, and freeing people of funds would also free them of that idea that they're bound to this material goods and greed. And this sense of freedom is then represented through the shots that we have next, because as the women take off their wigs, they become free in themselves. And this could be a reference to our need to free ourselves from social media or unrealistic expectations of others, but it could also be a reference to sort of the ability to be ourselves. And this being yourself is then shown in that third screenshot where we see the older woman lifting weights. So she subverts these stereotypes and in doing so gains a sort of larger sense of independence and freedom from that. Now the media and beauty industry are made focuses again through the next two shots. So initially we've got a high angle establishing shot used to show overcrowding and implying desperation of the people who live there. But we then see a sweatshop where it's very clear that none of the women who are in that place have freedom, which again is not only a political comment on materialism like we've seen earlier, but also the idea of gender equality being placed here. Which is weird when we see this astronaut on the third shot in this screen here. It provides an element of contrast, but it could also be referencing the first man to land on the moon, which is sort of a way in which our lack of freedom led to sort of great advancements for humankind. The way that we work and the society that we live in led to this. Alternatively, it could be that the freedom to think bigger created this sort of opportunity for us, for mankind. Now the sky on the left hand side looks almost like a cosmos, which again could be further references to the astronaut that we've just seen, but it could also reflect the idea of climate change once more through the fact that there's a lot of red tones here which normally suggest danger or warnings. We then see a typical shanty town, which despite the implied dilapidation, we have a very vibrant colour palette to indicate a very positive atmosphere. And the atmosphere is supported by the young men who are dancing. So they directly contrast the black men that we saw at the beginning of the video. Their body language connotes freedom, as does the overall idea of dance, and so does their clothing when we compare them to the slaves that we saw at the beginning. Now the shot of the women in the sweatshop follows the men, which suggests that the shop could be a location such as the one we've previously seen. It also provides an element of enigma and gets us to question what freedom actually means. We then also see the man in the pool at the beginning, in the middle here, who seems very similar to the one we saw at the beginning of the video, scattering the ashes. He seems free through the idea that he's in nature, but again contrasts with the women who we've just seen working. And we have a montage that then begins to play of different images which suggest freedom. So initially a woman breaks through a wall in a very similar style to Miley Cyrus's Wrecking Ball, but this woman's not given an identity and instead sort of represents breaking through obstacles. A man is then isolated in a very similar way to the women previously. Now his scene matches the lyrics "organisms in the sea," which might be a reference to the whale that's underneath his boat. In doing so, it helps Williams spread the message of the song, which may be related to nature or to climate change. And as our final two shots, we have a church congregation who join in with the song. Now this could be a reference to Pharrell's own culture, but also shows a sense of freedom through belief. Whereas that final image is perhaps the most poignant, as William points to his own mind. So on the one hand, this could suggest that the video's message is about mental struggle and allowing ourselves to be mentally free, but it could also be Pharrell asking us to think about the video and to think about the sort of things that he's raised within it. Okay, so a few key terms for us here. Have a look through them. Any that you don't understand, I'd be making note cards for, or at least getting a definition written down for them. I'd also make sure that you're using these in your own notes, so maybe go back through those and highlight where you are using some of these key terms. Keep an eye on the channel, make sure you're subscribed, hit the button below so you get notifications, because I'll be posting videos as often as I can during the period at the moment. And so I'll see you guys later for another video.